Niklsun here, and welcome to Coming Soon Movie News with Niklsun. I'm your host, and on this show, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we'll be going over all of the day's movie news, as well as going over what it means for the production in general, such as casting decisions, trailer announcements, director announcements, things like that. So, without any further ado, let's get started with today's Hot Topics. A couple of years ago, Neil Blomkamp really surprised a lot of people by debuting his first directorial film called District 9. And District 9 really did change the way that a lot of studio execs looked at how to make a film, because that film, as far as I know, it was around a $24 million budget, excluding P&A. But what he was able to do with that film was he was able to create realistic, photorealistic CGI on a almost micro budget for the type of movie that he made. Now, obviously, there were some sequences in the movie that probably could have helped with a little bit more money in the budget, but holy crap, I think everybody was completely shocked at the quality of that film. Not just the overall story and the character development, but even just the special effects and what this guy was able to do with that kind of a budget. And the type of story that he was telling, it was so relevant to the time, especially in the location that it was set in. It was a juxtaposition of the apartheid and everything like that, and it was just genius. And then last year, he came out with his follow-up, which was called Elysium, starring Matt Damon. And Elysium disappointed a lot of people. I don't know if anybody would have come out of that movie, even if it had been a lot better, and would have seen it as something lesser than District 9. Because District 9 was such a unique experience for a lot of people that Elysium was bound to disappoint. The only problem was that the film itself just wasn't as good as it should have been. So there's been a little bit of trepidation with his next film. And so when he came out and announced the title and what the story was going to be about, a lot of people were really enthusiastic about it because it sounded like it was going to be a lot different than his previous two films. And so the movie was called Chappie, and it was announced to be a sci-fi comedy. So it's going to be a different genre and a different tone that he was going to be dealing with this film as opposed to what he had been used to dealing with. So a lot of people were excited, and then we heard, Hugh Jackman came on board, and everything really started to come together, and it sounded really cool and really interesting. Well, now we have our first look at the trailer and the poster for the film, and I gotta tell you, I'm actually really excited about this movie. And there's a little bit of hesitance with that as well, and I'll get to that in a minute, but a couple of things that really stood out to me in this trailer. And when I saw it, I tweeted it out. When I tweeted the link, I said, Take notes, Transformers. This is how you make us care about a robot. And that's what I felt from it. I felt like I cared for him. I felt a feeling I almost can't even describe it. Like I felt almost a connection. I felt like they had been able to, he doesn't have any facial expressions at all. It was just through his body language and through the voice and the interactions that he has with the actors on screen. But I really felt like they had done a really swell job. Now, this is just a teaser trailer. There's not all that much footage in this trailer to really understand what the full scope of the story is going to be. But there were a lot of elements that really intrigued me in this. One of them was the original synopsis was that he gets kidnapped at birth by these two thugs, and I interpreted that as that, okay, they're going to kidnap him, they're going to treat him like crap, and then they're going to hold him for ransom for the guy who created him, and that's what the whole movie's going to be about. Turns out that doesn't look, at least at surface value, doesn't look to be the case, because you can see in the trailer that they're playing with him. They're trying to teach him, they're like, we're going to teach you to be a gangster, and they show him how to walk like a gangster, and it's just, it looks fun, it looks really intriguing and interesting. But the one other thing that I got from this trailer as well is that this movie is said to be like a comedy. And while there were a few little humorous parts in it, this looks like it was going to be a really endearing story, like a story of discovery and how someone can feel alienated and not be able to fit into society. Like that's the main theme that I can see him trying to bring about with this movie. So a lot of these things really spoke out to me. A couple of things that turned me off. Hugh Jackman's mullet, for one. It to me just doesn't seem like, again, we don't really know anything about his character outside of the fact that he doesn't trust AI and he feels that Chappie should be destroyed. And, so outside of that, we really don't know anything about his character. And I can't see somebody like Hugh Jackman signing on to this film unless the character or something about the film really spoke to him, because he's at that point in his career. There are a few actors out there who are in a position where they don't need to they're not like Morgan Freeman, where he'll just do it because he not only enjoys doing it, but because he gets paid. He's earned a reputation, and he always gives his all. But you look at somebody like Hugh Jackman, and Hugh Jackman is definitely somebody who's not going to put himself, movie 43 hopefully is the exception, but he's not going to put himself in something just to be a part of it or just for the cash or anything of that sort. I can't see him being like that, but at the end of the day, this is a job. This is his job. He very well may have chosen that. He may have had an opening. Maybe he wanted to work with the director. He didn't care what the project was. There's so many options and theories that could come out of that. But that was one of the things that just stood out to me, was his look. It kind of took me away from it for a second, because you can tell just how bad that looks. And, but one of the other things was, throughout the course of the trailer, you could kind of see a little bit of the progression of the acts of the film, especially with the fact that it looks like there's going to be a large action set piece in the third act of the film, much like his last two films. They've all kind of built up towards this big confrontation in the third act. Now, a lot of stories do follow that formula, but in the same regard, you look at Neil Blomkamp's films, they all have the same visual aesthetic. And I don't mean that, the camera shots are similar or anything. I mean, the setting looks very familiar to a Neil Blomkamp film. It looks like third world, and, I'm just starting to get a little bit tired of that, because I want to see him branch out. I want to see him tackle something different with his unique eye. I almost want to see like a suburban drama through his vision. I want to see a political thriller through his vision, but not set in Africa, not set in Mexico City. Set it in a different location, set it in an Arctic tundra, or a concrete jungle, if you will, a city. Set it in a different place, because I'm starting to feel that he will only do a movie, or he will only set a movie in a certain location because it's what is comfortable for him. And I want to see him step outside of his comfort zone, because I really feel like he is one of the most unique directors out there. He's one of those guys that you really need to keep an eye on, because let's face it, Neil Blomkamp was the man who Peter Jackson hand-selected to direct the Halo film back in, I think it was 2005 or 2006, before Microsoft shut down that production because the budget, I think, spiraled up to like $240 million. Like, it got a little bit out of control. And so he had handpicked Neil Blomkamp to direct that film. I mean, someone of Peter Jackson's caliber doesn't just handpick anybody. So, and we've seen what he is capable of doing, at least in the last two films. Now, Elysium aside, there were a lot of really great ideas, visual aesthetics to that movie. Speaking of the visual aesthetic, I really loved the sequences set on the Elysium space station. And that was something I was hoping to get a little bit more of in this film. We were going to get a different location. We were going to get a different set of circumstances. And the storyline looks similar. Or sorry, the storyline looks to be different, but most of the other stuff in the film just looks to be similar. So I'm a little hesitant about the film, but overall, I really did like the amount of emotion that came out of the trailer. I liked the look of everything, the aesthetics of how Chappie looked. We only got a little taste of Charlotte Copley's voice as Chappie, but still, I mean, everything about this so far is just looking really pleasant and really kind of in wonder. Just like I said, a journey. Like, this is going to be a story of exploration and trying to see how somebody like that can fit in, because that's what it's really going to be about. It's going to be a story of alienation, and how somebody who most people in the real world, it's going to be juxtaposed, but most people in the real world will appear on the outside to fit in with normal society, but they will internally have a conflict about how they feel alienated. They feel so different, and that movie is going to be the representation of this. So on those levels, I really am excited about it, but there's just some things from the teaser trailer, and it might just be me nitpicking. Neil Blomkamp, at least to me, is approaching a similar level that Christopher Nolan is. And let me explain before you start freaking out, okay? What I mean by that is that he himself almost appears to have his own genre or his own artistic style. When Christopher Nolan does a movie, you can see on screen that's a Christopher Nolan film. Neil Blomkamp so far has that same visual cue. You look at his film and you know that it's a Neil Blomkamp film. So with that comes, especially after the couple of films that he's done, there's a certain level of expectation when it comes to him. And now, even though he has nowhere near the roster that Christopher Nolan has, it's still, there's a parable there. I mean, it's very, very similar. You can see the trajectory that Neil Blomkamp's career can take, and he can approach something similar to a Christopher Nolan type filmography. Not to say that he's going to do a trilogy of comic book movies. I'm not saying exactly the same. I'm using it as an example or a metaphor, if you will. So I really do feel that he has that potential. Elysium was a little bit of a misstep. Hopefully Chappie can get him back on the right track. Chappie, as it stands right now, is going to be opening up on March 27th, 2015. But if we do get more information about this topic, then I'll definitely update you guys on here. Scott Waugh, the director of Active Valor and Need for Speed, a movie that just came out earlier this year, looks to be setting up his next directorial film. And it is none other than a big budget sci-fi actioner called Inversion. Now, there's pros and cons about this property. The pros to me, one of them is Scott Waugh. Because if you look at Active Valor and you look at Need for Speed, granted, there were issues with the script, issues with character development and stuff like that. And I am a huge proponent of character development. But the one thing that he was able to do is give us grounded, real-world action sequences that were real. They were not created in a computer. I mean, some of them were assembled in editing, yes, but everything was shot in camera. And that is one thing that I really have to commend about Scott Waugh. He is the type of guy to, if he can do it in camera, he's going to do it in camera. If they can do it CGI, but they can also do it in camera, he will do it in camera. And so being handed $120 million to go and do this big budget sci-fi action film, I'm on board with that. I'm intrigued by that. I want to see what he can do with something like that. That really does, intrigue me. But then I read the plot synopsis, and here's the plot synopsis about it. So the film is about two people on a frenzied journey across the globe to save Earth from an apocalyptic threat. A total reversal of gravity that causes whole cities and civilizations to uproot and plummet into the sky. So, that sounds ridiculously crazy. It could work. It sounds so outlandish. But, I mean, at face value, I would have been excited about that. That seems like it's something that's in my wheelhouse. But as soon as I read that, the first film that came to mind was, what was it called? The Core, with Aaron Eckhart and, I keep forgetting her name, Hilary Swank. With Aaron Eckhart, Hilary Swank, it also had, Delroy Lindo, it had Stanley Tucci, it had Teki Cairo, it had, who else was in it? There were plenty of other people. I think Angela Bassett was in the movie. It had a big cast. And it was so outlandish because it was about the core of the Earth has stopped spinning. Now, in reality, if that actually did happen, that would most likely cause the gravitational effect of Earth to stop, and so everybody would just go boop. But also our atmosphere would degenerate and we would all burn alive because the ozone layer, it would just be the end of the world as we know it. So that's what I am reminded of when I hear this. I see it as a slight, like they're almost taking few concepts from that and then making a completely different film about it. Now, I mean, that same theology can be said about almost every film. But still, I mean, thinking about what visually he could bring about with that film, that is interesting. Because there are elements of certain... Okay, almost every single storyline, every single conceivable thing to happen in a film has pretty much already been made in a film. So when people are going to start coming out, because we're going to get into an age now where there's nothing really new that can be done. We're almost at that point. There's a lot of stuff that's being regurgitated because it's so difficult to think of something new. So we are going to be getting into a point where that's why there's a lot of remakes. That's why there's a lot of sequels. And not a lot of original content because there's not as much original content to actually be created anymore. Now, there are new stories that can be told based on older stories and new takes on them, absolutely. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still just a version of something that's already been made. So coming out with a movie like this, yes, it's intriguing. It's got an interesting premise. But I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be intrigued. I'm going to wait to see some pictures. I'm going to wait to see the trailer before I make my final judgment on this. I am intrigued. It has my attention, but I can't get the core out of my head. I mean, the core to a lot of people is a guilty pleasure. I can watch it if it's on TV, you know, and I'm flipping through and it's on. I'll probably sit there and watch a fair amount of it, if not the whole thing, because it does have that. It came out in 2002. So, I mean, I was a teenager back then. So that, you know, I didn't care about character development back then. I cared about really cool action sequences. I cared about, you know, to me it wasn't corny dialogue, but I wanted that. You know, I wanted the, you know, lay off some steam, Bennett. You know, I wanted lines like that. And that movie did deliver. It was so off the wall crazy, and they even tried to have real world scientists legitimize what was happening, and they said theoretically this is possible. Well, yeah, but I mean, as from my favorite movie of all time, Kevin Costner, one of Kevin Costner's lines in JFK, he says, because he's talking about, you know, theoretical physics has proved the magic bullet theory. And he goes, well, yes, theoretical physics says that an elephant can hang from a cliff with its tail tied to a daisy. And I mean, you know, I mean, technically that's true. I mean, communism works in theory. So in theory, that movie, yes, there were elements of it that could have been possible, but it would have taken, you know, however much time to do. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to me about this is not even the premise of the movie or anything. It's Scott Waugh. And I am really interested to see what this guy's career is going to turn out to be like, because I think he has a really talented eye. The thing that he needs to work on, and you could see the improvement from Act of Valor, where he wasn't even working with actors, he was working with real-life Navy SEALs. So I think he did a pretty serviceable job on that one, to working with actual actors who, like, you know, Aaron Paul, Emmy award-winning actor. You know, you have Dominic Cooper, who is... I don't think, you know, he wasn't Academy Award nominated, but if anybody out there who has not seen The Double, you need to see The Double. That movie, or Devil's Double, sorry, The Devil's Double, where he plays, I think it's the son of Saddam Hussein, and his, like, doppelganger almost. They hire a guy, make him look like him so that he can be, you know, a doppelganger of sorts in real life. But anybody who hasn't seen that movie, you need to check it out. If you are skeptical about Dominic Cooper because of seeing him in Need for Speed or in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, if you need to see whether or not why this guy keeps getting roles, check out that film. You'll be, it's just an incredible performance. But I mean, you know, there are a lot of elements to what Scott Waugh can do with this that really does make it interesting. So I'm intrigued by it. Filming is scheduled to start in April 2015 as long as everything goes according to plan, which means if that's the case, we're going to start hearing casting announcements, and that could also change it around. If they were to get, like, let's say, for just throwing it out there, just because he's in a movie that is coming out this weekend. If Matthew McConaughey signed on to that film, Matthew McConaughey is at a point right now where he is being given probably 15 to 20 scripts a day. And if he chose this movie, there's a reason for that. And Matthew McConaughey is at a point right now where he is not only just skyrocketing to popularity, he is very, very smartly choosing his scripts and his properties that he's working on. So that would intrigue me as well. You know, all these little things can come out and say, okay, this premise is ridiculous, but there's got to be something there for somebody like this to sign on. Just saying. So filming's expected to start sometime in April 2015. There's no release date set, but you could probably expect it sometime in 2016 amidst the onslaught of superhero films that we're going to be getting. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, if we do get more information about Inversion or anything else about another Scott Waugh production, I will definitely update you guys on here. This is actually perfect timing for this last story to come out because in the next 2 weeks or so, I'm going to be launching on one of my new sections of the channel, which is going to be called, I actually don't have an official title for it yet, but essentially it's going to be movies that were never made, or movies that went through really, you know, heavy production troubles and never ended up making it to the finish line. And so one of the films that was actually going to be involved in that show was David O. Russell's movie that was originally titled Nailed. Now, Nailed was a movie that was filmed about 6 years ago. I think it was 2008 that it filmed in. And it starred Jessica Biel, Jake Gyllenhaal, Tracy Morgan, Catherine Keener. I think James Marsden was in it as well. And the whole storyline, it was a political satire. It was a healthcare satire, which I mean, it was right in line with all of the films that David O. Russell had done. But before that, he'd done, I Heart Huckabees. He'd done Three Kings. And anybody who wants to know about the production troubles of I Heart Huckabees, go online and look up David O. Russell. I think it was Lily Taylor. And oh my God, I cannot believe, like, apparently, George Clooney was the same way with him. Lily Taylor just lost it on him. I mean, he apparently wasn't that great of a guy to work for. He turned your performances into something amazing on screen, absolutely. But the actual time through production was torturous for a lot of actors, which is funny because Jennifer Lawrence has now, been in 2 of his movies, going to be in a third called Joy. But anyway, nailed okay. This movie went through, I think the worst production hell that any movie has gone through, with the exception of maybe Apocalypse Now. So the basic story of it was the movie was shut down over the period of actual filming and then also post-production, which they never even got finished. They barely even got it started. But the movie was shut down a record 14 times. 14 times they had to stop filming, and I don't just mean stop for a couple hours. They had to stop for days, if not weeks, if not, I think even sometimes a month. But he filmed this movie, and the financial backers for the film were less than scrupulous. Let's just put it that way. They were not reliable. They didn't have the funds that they needed. There were just a lot of problems with everything, and the main whole thing about this, the point that I'm going to make when I get to it, is about how difficult it is to make some films sometimes. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. But looking at what eventually happened, because this movie was about, Jessica Biel's character was one of 3 people who were going to be storming Washington, D.C. because of there's nothing like affordable healthcare out there. There now is Obamacare in the States. So that's one of the reasons why this movie is probably not going to be getting a domestic distribution. But it was all about how she, through some accident, which this was the one scene they never even got to film, which was the crucial scene of the movie. It was called Nailed. And she was a woman who had a nail driven into her skull. Now, I don't think that it was somebody who actually took the nail and went and drove it into her skull. I think it was some sort of accident where the nail fell and it was embedded into her head. But she didn't have any insurance, and so she could not have it removed. And, if you didn't have insurance, that was something that was most likely going to kill her. But they said, so what? You don't have insurance. We're not going to do it. And it was really going to be a satire about how these companies actually view human lives. And they don't view them as humans. They view them as numbers. And I think we're all aware of that now. But it was really going to be an astonishing film, and it was going to be one of those dark comedies. It was going to toe that line between drama and comedy. And so Jake Gyllenhaal played a congressman who she was trying to basically suck up to get his support for all this, and then they were going to go to Congress and yada yada yada. So the main thing that I'm trying to get with this, though, is how extremely difficult at the end of the day it is to get a film made. I mean, I keep going back. One of the oldest ones that I can remember is, maybe just because it's one of the more public ones, but Empire Strikes Back. Because of all of the production troubles that George Lucas had on the original Star Wars, and rightfully so, no movie like that had been done at that time. So it was a real big risk. And then coming into Empire Strikes Back, George Lucas said, I'm not dealing with the studio on this. There's too much of a hassle. There's too much, sacrifice that he has to give. He has to cut out a lot of stuff in order for them to say, we'll give you more money if you cut this, this, and this, or if you change this, this, and this, or if you add this, this, and this. And he didn't want to do that. That to him was removing the integrity of the project that he had created. So he decided to self-finance the movie. And throughout production, everything started to get out of control. They had a fire on one of their sets, which increased the budget of the film. There were several different issues. He wanted to spend more time dealing with ILM because they had a lot more stuff to do. They had to do the Hoth sequence at the beginning with the AT-AT walkers, and then he had to do the Cloud City sequence at the end. And through everything, he eventually ended up having to go back to 20th Century Fox and say, I need some money. And so they had conditions. I can't remember off the top of my head what those conditions were, but he had to sacrifice some things for that film. And I mean, most recently, one of the biggest ones, and I've been flabbergasted that this movie hasn't come out yet, is Steven Spielberg's Robopocalypse. This is a movie I've been following ever since it was announced. And, he had Chris Hemsworth attached to the movie, and I want to say Michelle Monaghan, but I think that was wrong. I think it was another actress. But that was a movie that was going to be essentially about a robot uprising and a robot apocalypse. And it was just, about sentient AI and humans and how their worlds were going to interconnect. It was going to be like World War Z almost, but with robots. It was going to be this massive production. And the studio said, no, we're not paying for it. They said to Steven Spielberg, arguably the most prolific director in Hollywood history, the most recognizable name in the movie industry. They said, no, we're not paying for it. That to me is mind-blowing. That is ridiculous. I mean, that would be the equivalent of, let's go back to him, be the equivalent of Obama going into a store and saying, I want this for this price, and them saying, no. I mean, that's a damn president. I mean, obviously, he's not going to shut the store down, but if he really wanted to, he would just make a phone call and shut the store down. He would never do that in a million years. But I'm just saying, somebody with that amount of power was told no. And it's the one thing I just thought of. It's surprising that a studio said no to him, yet they said yes to Michael Bay's Transformers Age of Extinction. Let that sink in for a second. I mean, sorry, I just got distracted by that. That to me was just ridiculous. But anyway, there are so many directors out there that have such a hard time getting their film made through all the logistical processes that a film has to go through. I mean, look at Roger Corman's Fantastic Four movie. There's a reason that didn't come out, but still, it never came out. It just looked awful. You have Tim Burton's Superman Lives, which John Schnepp is doing an amazing documentary on called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. So definitely check that out when it comes out. You have Jodorowsky's Dune, which is a fantastic documentary. If you guys haven't seen that, it's on Netflix. It's a fantastic documentary about his trials about trying to get this movie made, and everything was working out for him everywhere, left, right, and center. And then the funding just didn't show up, and the movie just collapsed because it was going to be so ambitious, and there was going to be things that were done in that movie that I don't even think have been done yet, or if they have, they were very primitive. So I mean, it was just ridiculous, the fact that that movie didn't get made. I can understand at that time why that movie didn't get made, but still, there are a lot of instances where this happens, and a lot of people think that they're just going to throw money at a movie. No, that's not the case. A lot of times they will come back and they'll say you can make that movie for half the budget, or some actors will sign on to a film. I can't remember the actual term, but they will sign on to a film without getting paid up front, and they will take a percentage of the back end deal. Or they may only work for scale, which is the bare minimum. It's almost like an hourly wage, essentially. They are paid a bare minimum by the Screen Actors Guild. And it's just like, and that's when you can tell that somebody's passionate about a movie. Like, you look at Wes Anderson films, there's a reason why they have so much high caliber talent in those films, and those budgets are still really small. It's because they don't have to worry about having a $200 million budget to pay all these actors. They will come in and they will work for scale, or they will work, sometimes they even work for free. It's rare that happens. That's usually only if they owe somebody a favor. But still, to me, it's absolutely ridiculous that certain movies don't get made, especially considering the people behind them. And I mean, some of these projects, none of the ones that I've mentioned already, but some of the projects that came out or were coming out that were shelved were due to the writer's strike back in 2008. Like, I remember Oliver Stone was gearing up to film Pinkland with, I think it was Bruce Willis and Channing Tatum, and it was going to be another Vietnam War movie. I was really excited about that film because it was Oliver Stone, who's one of my favorite directors out there, returning to the Vietnam War era. I mean, he had Platoon, you had, in a way, you had JFK, you had Born on the 4th of July, you had all of these fantastic movies that were all set around that time. And it was mainly because he was involved in Vietnam, like he fought in Vietnam. So he had a really personal connection to it. So seeing the movie Pinkland come, or about to gear up for production, and then the movie just gets the rug pulled out from under it, I'm flabbergasted by that. I don't understand it. I don't understand how that can be, canceled, yet Alvin and the Chipmunks 4 is on the way. A movie that we do not need, or The Smurfs 3, which is going to be a reboot. I mean, like, just let that sink in. Quality films from quality directors, say what you will about Oliver Stone, but quality films from quality directors not being approved, yet we will get, UA Ball will get greenlit another movie. or Brett Ratner will have Hercules, greenlit. By the way, I just watched Hercules last night. Where did the budget go? Where? I mean, that movie to me, first off, it was an hour and a half movie. It felt like it was 2.5 hours. The budget must have gone to the actors because it did not go into really anything else. I mean, there was one battle sequence in the middle of the movie that was kind of cool. And it was a larger scale, but still, I don't know where the budget went in that movie because it wasn't the Hercules movie that we were told to be getting. Also, the reason, if anybody who hasn't seen it, the reason why the lion head on his head is a lot smaller than the lion that you actually see is because at the very opening of the film, this isn't really a spoiler, it's just going to get you prepared if you do watch it. The opening of the film, his nephew is telling the story of Hercules' 12 labors. I know I'm getting off topic here, but just give me a sec. He's telling the story to other people of Hercules' 12 labors. And so he tells of the story about him attacking the boar. And so that's when the boar runs up and smashes a tree, and he jumps up on the tree and smashes his head with the big club that he has. And then it goes through the Hydra attack, and you see the Hydra attack. And then it shows the lion, and the lion is this big lion, and its hide is so strong that nothing can penetrate it. Well, then later on in the movie, they show you, did you kill the Hydra? And he just has the heads of all these guys in a bag, and they had like these almost serpent masks on. And so they were really trying to tell people that the labors didn't happen the way that they said that they happened in the mythology. These were real world attempts at showing it. So the lion that he had was not this mega gargantuan lion that he fought in that one sequence. By the way, all those little sequences are right at the very beginning, and then it cuts into the real world. But still, I mean, I don't get how that movie was made. I don't get how Brett Ratner keeps getting films made. I just don't. I mean, you look at the abomination that was X-Men The Last Stand. You look at After the Sunset. I didn't mind Red Dragon. But Tower Heists. Tower Heist was serviceable. But it still wasn't very good, especially considering the cast it had involved with it. It was supposed to be Eddie Murphy's comeback, and it failed at that. But still, I don't know, man. It really just surprises me, the fact that there are certain films out there that just do not get made. And I'm just confused by it. But anyway, Nailed so far is looking to get a UK release sometime next summer. We may be seeing it come over domestically, but it's probably not. And it also has been retitled Politics of Love. Good God. So yeah, if we do get more information about that, the main reason I wanted to bring this up was just to talk about how difficult it actually is to get these films made, and how a lot of people just aren't aware of the amount of time and money and energy that it takes to make these films. A lot of people are just unaware of how long it actually takes and how expensive these things are. But still, it's just so confusing to me that certain people out there have an almost impossible task, of getting these films made. It's just flabbergasting to me. But anyway, if we get more information about this topic, I will definitely update you guys on here. But before I go, I just want to let you guys know that tomorrow, the final trailer for The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, will be dropping. So we're going to be talking about that on Friday's episode. But more importantly, check back on Monday, because Monday is going to be the first episode, and there's probably going to be a week or two gap between that and the next one. But it is going to be the first episode where I have my new co-host, Devin, as well as Joseph Flint, who's going to be calling in via video call. And so we're going to be doing, as it stands right now, we're going to be doing a 3-part episode. So it'll be 3 roughly half-hour segments about different topics, and just going back and forth about our opinions and whether or not we have any more insight into that. So definitely check back on Monday for that. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a really great show. Can't wait for you guys to check it out. So definitely check back on Monday for more information about that. Well, that'll about do it for us here on Coming Soon Movie News with Niklsun. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have been a great audience. Go ahead and click the subscribe button there in the bottom corner. You can get updates whenever we post a new video. You can also find me on Twitter at Niklsun, Niklsun, for all of your movie updates. And also give us a like on our Facebook page at facebook.com/movie news with Niklsun. If you guys ever have a topic or a question you'd like to have talked about on the show, you can go ahead and put a comment in the comment section, or you can email me at movienewswithniklsun@gmail.com. And it'll be answered hopefully on every Friday episode. But until next time, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.